One of the mitzvahs that are basic and primary to being an Orthodox Jew is to shecht meat before you eat it. And it's interesting to note that if you search for the source for the mitzvah of shechita, if you read through the Torah cover to cover and look for the details of where the Torah relates how to shecht, where to shecht, when to shecht, what the process is, you'll find yourself spending a lot of time without an answer. Because the only source for shechita in the Torah is the following pasuk. The pasuk says, "Ki yirchak mimcha hamakom," if you'll be far away and you wish to shecht your own animals, meaning not kachim, then you should shecht them kashet tzivasicha, as I have commanded you. V'achalta v'sharecha, you should eat these animals in your shar. So Hashem commanded Moshe to tell over that when you shecht your own animals, you should shecht them as I commanded you. But when you then search in Kol HaTorah Kula for the commandment, you don't find it anywhere. Says Rashi, according to the Gemara, that this refers to the fact that Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu how to do the shechita, as Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu the rest of the Torah Sheba'al Peh. Then the reference to it is, Hashem says, "Shech the animal kashet tzivasicha," as I have commanded you, meaning as is stated in Torah Sheba'al Peh. Clearly, this is an interesting example of a phenomenon that we see all the time, where the Torah tells you if you eat an animal that's not shechted, you'll be chayiv malchus. It's an avela. But the Torah fails to tell you how to shecht it. Again, the Torah Sheba'al Peh being the background, being the entire underpinning of the Torah Sheba'al, certainly we understand it. And in that context, it makes sense. But without the Torah Sheba'al Peh, much of Torah Sheba'al makes no sense. Now that's basic to us, and it's clear, and something we accept. But that's not something that's very well accepted amongst, unfortunately, many of our own, and certainly amongst the Gentiles. The concept that the Torah Sheba'al Peh is the underpinning, is the understanding, is the basis of all the mitzvahs. And what's interesting to note is that not only to us in our generation is this something that needs chizuk, this is something that was debated in the time of Korach. When Korach rebelled against Hashem, it was not just against Hashem, it was not just against Moshe Rabbeinu, it was against Torah Sheba'al Peh. What Korach was saying very clearly was, Moshe Rabbeinu invented this stuff. It is not min Hashemayim. Hashem did not tell him this. He invented it. Moshe Rabbeinu made this stuff up. What motivated Korach to do this, the Psukim are very clear about. The Medrash explains to us that Korach was jealous. Instead of, he felt he should have been the Nasi. Moshe Rabbeinu did not appoint Korach to be the Nasi. He was jealous, and therefore he said, I'm going to be Mavatel, that which Moshe Rabbeinu said. And he schlepped with him 250 of the Rosh Sanhedrin, 250 of the leaders of the Jewish nation. And the question that really begs being understood is, how did he get 250 people, great men, tremendous Torah scholars, people who were the heads of Sanhedrin, who heard Hashem say, Anochi Hashem Lakecha, how did he get them to be kofir, to deny that Hashem told Moshe the Torah Sheba'al Peh? And Rashi brings down a very cryptic description of Korach's plan, his plot, and what had happened. It says Rashi as follows: Ma'asa, what did he do? Almad v'kanas reish nun Rashi Sanhedrin. Korach got together and stood up 250 of the great leaders of the generation. Ruvain Mishevet, Ruvain, most of them from Shevet. Ruvain, these people were Yitzur ben Shteir, great people who were Krui Eda, men of reputation. Vilbisham Talisos, he put on Talesos on them, he put a talus on each of them. Shekulon Tchelis, it was completely made of Tchelis. Tchelis is that blue and purple dye, the color we don't know exactly what it is, but he made a talus completely out of Tchelis. He wrapped each of them in such a talus. Bo v'amdu lifnei Moshe, they went and stood in front of Moshe. Amru, the Rosh Sanhedrin said to Moshe, Talis shekula shetchelis, a talus that's completely made of tchelis, chayeves b'tzitzit o p'tura, is it obligated and tzitzit o patur? Amlem chayeves. Moshe Rabbeinu answered, one is chayev. Even though there's tchelis in the beged, even though you have the blue dye in the beged itself, you still have to put on tzitzits. Hischilu l'sachek, they began laughing. And they said, Ev shetalis shel min echad. Is it possible that a talus made of one type of material. Talis made of wool. One strand of tchelis will patrid. This one, which is completely made of tchelis, is it possible that it won't pater itself? And from this question came the rebellion. So Rashi is telling us very clearly that this question was the source. This question was the tema, the bomb question that caused 250 great Torah sages to deny that Moshe Rabbeinu was given the Torah from Hashem. And the problem is that the question doesn't sound that powerful. Again, if you have a beged that's completely made of tchelis, completely made of a dyed wool, is it obligated in tzitzits or not? I don't know. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. They stand up, wrap themselves in his talis, and when Moshe Rabbeinu says, yes, it's obligated in tzitzits, they start laughing, and with this state of laughing, they then deny the rest of Torah Sheba'al Peh. Number one, the question doesn't seem that potent. Maybe, despite the fact that the beged is all tchelis, maybe it still is obligated in tzitzits. But much worse than that, if you want to start asking questions on the Torah, there are many, much more difficult questions that one can ask. We're all familiar with a much more obvious one. There is a din in the Torah called para aduma. Anyone who is involved in the processing of the para aduma, from the man who shechs it, from the kohen who burns it, anyone involved in any of the processes of the para aduma becomes tameh, and yet that afer, the eventual water that comes out from it, is the water that makes a person tahor. And that is a major kasha. That is a question which Shlomo HaMelech, with all of his wisdom, could not answer. So if you want to start asking questions on the Torah, I think there are many and very powerful questions. This one from tzitzis does not seem to be the worst of them. They're far more severe. And yet this question of tchelis on the tzitzis was such a powerful question, again, that it ended up being the source of denying that Moshe Rabbeinu received the Torah from Shemayim. And the question is, what is the potency of this question? How did it lead to such a kfirah? And I'd like to see if we can answer that this evening with an understanding of what was actually going on. But to do that, let's focus on an interesting event that happened. In Paris in 1895, the Lumiere brothers were the pioneers in photography in their day, and they introduced the first public showing of a movie. Now, clearly no one knew then what a movie was. No one had been to a moving picture. Up until then it was stills. This was the first public exhibition in Paris of an actual film. Now, the room was dark, and they brought these few adventuresome people in to see the clipping. The actual movie was a film of a train. What they did was they stood down at the end of a station, and they filmed the train as the train was coming in. And initially the train is far away, it's small, it starts looming larger and larger and larger, and the film was a short clip depicting the train as it comes into the station. So the lights are dimmed, the audience is gathered, they sit down in their chairs, and this is the moment in history when people are now going to experience the moving picture. The reaction of the crowd was very interesting. They began screaming in terror and jumped under their seats hiding because the train was coming right at them. You see, no one there ever had experienced a movie. And even though they knew it was just a film, they knew that it was just a picture, the sight of a train coming at them was so powerful that they began screaming in abject terror and climbed under their seats. The point is that any vision that we see, anything that we experience, requires interpretation. For us today, if we were to watch such a movie clip, we would understand it in its context. We wouldn't be moved because we understand the background, the context. The interpretation of the visual image is very different from what it appears to be. And understanding the context and understanding the interpretation is a key to understanding and reacting appropriately. There are things in the world of negotiation called rules of engagement. Rules of engagement mean that there are certain procedures, certain protocols that you follow to the letter, because if you violate one of those rules, one of those cardinal protocols, you end up sending the wrong message. The person on the other end gets a totally misread understanding, and it could lead to catastrophe. when the American troops first occupied Iraq the second time in 1983, the National Public Radio reported a very interesting event that had happened. There was a group of soldiers, actually a platoon, that went to the local mosque. Their job was a peacekeeping effort. They were going to ask the local cleric, the local religious leader, for help in organizing and distributing relief foods and various supplies. So this platoon went to the mosque, and the Muslims saw what was happening. They saw these armed Americans coming for the mosque. They assumed that the Americans were either going to destroy the mosque or going to arrest their cleric. Hundreds of them came out with their arms in the air, yelling, screaming, ranting, raving, and they were going to attack this platoon of American soldiers. Now, the problem that the Americans faced was very real. On the one hand, to shoot would be obviously slaughter. You're going to kill innocent people. Worse than that, you're going to send a message to all of Iraq that Americans are butchers. To retreat, they can't do that because you can't have an armed platoon retreat in front of unarmed citizens because you're going to demoralize the entire army. It happens to be that the leader of the American troops, the commanding officer, was Lieutenant Colonel Christopher Hughes, and he was a very sharp-witted fellow. He picked up a megaphone and he told his men, "Take a knee," which is a command to bend down one knee to the ground. "Point your rifle at the ground." And then pointed their rifle at the ground. And then he said the most perplexing command that American troops ever heard overseas. And that command over the megaphone was, "Now smile." And to a man, every member of the platoon smiled. And they said that the mob stopped. You could feel them sort of morph. And the whole mood changed. They smiled back. And before you knew it, the Muslims went over and they were slapping each other on the back, happy, happy, and the catastrophe was averted. Very quick thinking, very intelligent planning, but here's the point. The tension, the energy, the anger was dispelled with one very intelligent and well-planned move. Laughter is a very interesting phenomenon. If you've ever been in a very tense situation, if you've ever been in a negotiations or in a very, very hostile environment, and something funny happens, somebody falls, or something unusual happens, and there's a laugh, you could feel it's like static electricity, there's a release, and everybody laughs, and the whole scene changes. In hostage situations, that's what occurs. In many situations in life, that's what occurs, because laughter has this amazing capacity to dispel the tension, to change the environment, to change the entire interpretation of what's going on, and it's like a release. You could feel it like an electric shock going off, and the entire emotionality changes, and people are now in a very different mood, and the consequences and results are very different. If you'd like to understand what Korach did, and if you'd like to understand the question, it was not the question. Whether you put tzitzits on a tchelis beged or not is not a big question. But it wasn't what Korach was doing. What Korach was doing is what the Das HaKenim explains. He got together 250 Roshei Sanhedrin for a party. He brought them together for a party, and he said, "We're now going to see something very, very humorous. I'm going to show you the bazayin. I'm going to show you the mockery of what Moshe Rabbeinu was trying to put upon us. I'm going to show you how foolish he is, and I'm going to demonstrate to you how ridiculous what he says is." With that attitude, the Roshei Sanhedrin came forward and they asked this question, which may have had some validity, may not have had some validity, but the point was they were not interested in hearing an answer. Their interest was in mocking, their interest was in derision, and their interest was in making fun of Moshe Rabbeinu. With that attitude, the strength of the question didn't matter, the power of the answer was irrelevant, because the attitude of mockery, the attitude of making fun, of scorn, of derision was what they were focused on. And with that attitude, what it led them to was total, complete kfira, and denying everything. Not just this particular mitzvah, but the entire package, and led to the death of these 250 people, and Korach as well. And this power, called leitzonus, called laughing, mocking, scorn, is a very, very potent force. In Korach's case, ended up being the destruction of he and his congregation. But I think understanding how it works, that laughter can change the emotions, that it can take a situation and reverse it from hostility, it can bring it to happiness, from tension, it can bring release. It's like a lightning that just strikes, and all of a sudden the mood changes, is a very interesting phenomenon. And the reason why it's very interesting is because while laughter, mockery has a negative side, it also has a very, very key and essential positive side to it. And I'll share with you what I mean by that. My job takes me to different places, some places that I prefer not to be. Not long ago, I was visiting a fellow who I knew very well in the psychiatric ward. He was there because he was on suicide watch. And part of my conversation with him was to try to convince him to take the medication that his doctors wanted him to take. And it was a bit ironic when I asked him, why aren't you taking your meds? And he said to me, well, it's hard to know what's in those. You know, it can be dangerous to your health. I don't put anything in me that might be bad for my health. Now, because we were somewhat close, and I apologized and asked him, if you don't mind if I'm rude, he said no. I said, well, excuse me for saying it, but suicide also could be bad for your health. And my point was, if you don't take the antidepressants and you jump off a roof, your health will be greatly impacted by that. One could argue that whatever danger these particular meds has is less than falling 4 flights, and being dead. But here's the observation: in his mind, it wasn't inconsistent, and I'll explain to you why. When he was in a good, healthy state of mind, he was very health conscious, exercised, ate carefully, because that's who he was. When he was depressed, nothing mattered. And it's interesting that the same person, a change in mood is radically different to the extent that you can't recognize the two. Now that's clearly a case of a mood disorder, a rather extreme example. But the reality is that moods affect us in a very, very real way. Moods shape the way we feel, the way we value things, the way we react to things in a very, very real way. If you've ever spoken to a clinically depressed person and you tell them, you're going to die, okay, well, but you understand, the building is burning. And if you stay where you are, you're going to be burned. All right, and you're going to burn, and it's going to be a painful death. You're going to burn to a crisp, and you're going to be screaming. All right, you think I should move? I think so. All right. But that's where the person's at. Their mood is so black, so empty, so that they can't get up off the chair despite the fact that they know they're in mortal danger. And being aware that moods shape the way I feel is a very important part of being a successful person. Daniel Goleman, in his book Social Intelligence, tells of a very interesting acquaintance of his. He says that he knew of a family who got married when they were older, had one child, and they did everything in their power to give this child the absolute best upbringing that she possibly could have. And he describes that when he went to their Upper West Side apartment, they were clearly well off. This little girl had every toy under the sun, everything imaginable, from the fanciest dollhouses to the most elaborate dolls to the whole 9 yards. The only thing lacking from this little girl's life was something called friends. And the reason why friends were lacking was because this couple realized that if the girl has friends, there are going to be ups, there are going to be downs, there might be fights, there might be exchanges of words, and they wanted to shelter their daughter from any negativity, from any bad feelings, so they arranged for her life to be one sheltered cocoon almost without any interaction with her peers. Now, besides the perverseness of that type of upbringing, Daniel Goleman makes a very important point. He says, would you like to know what a child learns in the busy interactions of childhood? A child learns some of the most important lessons of life, one of which is as follows. What happens when things don't go your way? What happens when your friend says, no, I will not let you use my toy? What happens when your friend takes your toy and you find yourself crying, bitter, and in a bad mood? One of the key lessons of life that you learn is how to regulate your moods. How to, despite the fact that you're upset, go on with your day. And despite the fact that you got into a fight with your friend, you continue doing what you're doing. You learn to control your moods, you learn to regulate your moods, and you learn to go on about life. And his point as a psychologist is that if a person doesn't learn to regulate their moods, to be in control of their mood, it is very unlikely that they'll find much success in life, because invariably you're going to have downs, you're going to have things that hit you, you're going to have things that bother you, and if you don't learn how to roll with the punches, it's very unlikely that you'll be successful. And I got to see this kind of, as they say, up front and personal. Last weekend I was in Chicago, and I had a beautiful time. It was a Shabbaton for a Beis Yaakov, and I spoke 6 times on Shabbos. And the girls, unlike boys, were very receptive. They were actually listening, asking questions before, asking questions afterwards. And I left the Shabbos, I was high, it was beautiful. And on the way to the airport, actually before, somebody had called me, Rabbi Schaefer, do you remember me? Sure, I would like to speak to you. I said, sure, I can make time. I knew the fellow well. So we agreed to sit down for lunch. And we sit down for lunch, and the first 3/4 of an hour I'm talking about his issues, what's doing with your life, etc. And then he asked me what to do with TBT, so I tell him when things are going well. He says, how financially? I tell him, well, things are not going so well. And on the spot, he makes a major pledge. I mean, a major, big deal pledge. I never thought he was within the realm of capable of it. I certainly didn't anticipate it. I didn't invite him for lunch for that reason. Needless to say, on my way to the airport, I was very, very happy. It was a great Shabbos. Did something very successful now, TBT set up, and I'm very, very happy. Of course, as life takes its turns, I miss my plane. And I wasn't so happy. But not only wasn't I so happy, I sat there doing what many of us do. I began beating myself up. You just blew it. Because of a half hour, you're now going to lose 24 hours. You're now going to waste so much time. You may not even get on the next plane, which I didn't. I had to sleep in Chicago. And I was beating myself up for being late, because had I rushed, had I been there on time, I would have been on that plane. And I'm berating myself and literally beating myself up for a number of hours while waiting for the standby plane. At about 10:30 at night, and I got to the airport somewhere around 5 o'clock, I am not in a very good mood. And I realized that I'm not accomplishing that much. And I decided, I'm trying to learn. People next to me making noise. I said, that's it. I got up from my chair, and I happened to have had a particular type of headset with me, which I didn't have batteries for, which made me a little bit more upset. And I went to the Sharper Image, and I asked the fellow, and I wasn't even that polite, I suspect, when I said, could I purchase one AAA battery? The guy looks at me and goes, you want one AAA battery? I said, yeah. He says, here, take 2. It's on me. And I said, wow. And then I said these words, I just missed my plane. I was so angry, and you just made my day. Thank you. And I walked away happy. Happy. And it was the most strange occurrence that I'd experienced in a long time. But that's the point. My mood blackened my day. Had you met me in that black mood, I don't know how polite I would have been. Before the battery cost $2. I could have bought it, but it's something changed, something lightened my mood, and I was in a very different mood. If you'd like to understand the amazing impact of a sense of humor, if you'd like to understand the amazing effect of laughter, it is to take a mood and change it from blackness to joy. The simple act of laughing, of ha, 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 reverses your entire mood, your entire mindset, changes the very essence of what you're feeling, changes the way you feel about things, changes the way you react, and radically affects your moods. If you'd like to know one of the most effective tools for regulating your moods, it's something called laughter. And amazingly, it really isn't that difficult. If I was in a black mood and really thought about it, instead of having somebody offer me some free batteries, had I just thought of something humorous or taken a light approach, I probably could have gotten out of that mood. But being attuned to this, being aware of it, has a huge effect. As a Talmud of the Rosh Yeshiva, I cannot tell you how many times the Rosh Yeshiva would come into Blackshire and say, you guys have to have a sense of humor. You must have a sense of humor. Life has its ups, life has its downs. There are going to be things you got to learn to laugh. The Rosh Yeshiva said it so many times, I can't even remember the amount of times the Rosh Yeshiva would say it. And at the time, as a young fellow, I didn't appreciate it. I didn't know what the Rosh Yeshiva meant. But as you go through life, and you see, no matter what your life is, there are going to be moments. There are going to be trials, tribulations. My wife has a beautiful expression. She says, the person that you see that has a perfect life is the person that you don't know. Because the minute you understand what's going on in that perfect life, you immediately know that there's a lot of things that aren't perfect. Because every human being has troubles. Every human being has trials, tribulations. Every human being has sorrows. But how you deal with that and the mood that you come out of from that situation will vastly affect your success. One of the great keys to regulating your moods, one of the great keys to success is learning to have a sense of humor, learning to laugh, learning to take a lighthearted approach to things. Because again, it changes your mood, you're happy, you're lighthearted, and the world is full of optimism, joy, and you could go about your life in a very successful manner. But if you don't learn that secret, you're going to have blackness, darkness, depression in your life, because there are going to be setbacks, there are going to be failures, there are going to be big ones, little ones, but they're going to be a part of life. Many, many frustrations will befall you. And one of the great keys to learning to be successful is learning to develop a sense of humor. And great people have a sense of humor, despite the fact that they're very focused. One of the most focused, intense human beings that I know is Rabbi Harris, one of our shivas here in Chavetz Chaim. There are few people I know who are as successful as he, a few people I know who are as driven and ambitious in the right way as he. And I remember vividly one breakfast when he said to me these words, Barry, tell me a joke. Now that was very, very out of character. Harris was not the kind of person who told jokes, nor asked somebody else, and certainly asking me to tell a joke was really not too smart. But I said, Rebbe, what do you mean? And he really explained to me that he was, at that point, he had a lot on his plate. He was acting as Rosh Yeshiva, giving block share, in the middle of the high school, involved in the finances. He had been involved in a very, very difficult situation that morning, and he just felt he needed to laugh. And I learned a very important lesson from that encounter. And that is that using the power of laughter, using that lightheartedness, using that joy that comes from it is a very key tool to success in life. Because it doesn't matter who you are. And it doesn't matter where you will find yourself in life. There will be many, many setbacks, many things that don't go your way. And the ability to learn to laugh and to take a lighthearted attitude changes the situation from solemn and grave to happy and joyful. And much like that lieutenant colonel who told his soldiers to smile, and he changed the mood. The entire mood was palpably changed. Laughing, telling a joke, taking a lighthearted attitude to it can change your mood, can radically change the way you feel about things. Once your mood changes, clearly you feel very differently about things. Instead of being down and devaluing things, you start feeling them to be very important. And that is one very, very key reason why it's important to have a sense of humor. There is a second reason why it is key to develop a sense of humor, and that is with your interaction with others. Because at the end of the day, whether it be neighbors, friends, spouse, children, if you don't have a sense of humor and you don't act with a sense of humor, invariably you will hurt people's feelings, you will get them angry, you'll get them upset. And having a light-hearted sense of humor and enjoying a laugh and learning to laugh at yourself, learning to laugh at the silly things that happen greatly eliminates the hostility, greatly changes the whole mode, and is one of the keys to relationships. And now I want to share something with you that I find may hurt me, but I want to do it anyway. There were two muffins baking in an oven. One of them yells, "Wow, it's hot in here." The other muffin replies, "Holy cow, a talking muffin." Now, it is very polite of you to laugh, but the reason why I told that joke is because when I tell a joke, it is very rare that I get laughter after it. And I got to appreciate this very, very clearly as a high school Rebbe. I would write routines for Shmuz that were hilarious, that was so funny that I could barely contain myself. I'd get up and perform the routine, and the guys in the Shmuz would be... Was there a joke, Rabbi? Is there something funny? Now, how do I know it was hilarious? How do I know it was rolling in the floor humor? Because we had Chazaras Shmuz. The Shmuz was on Wednesday. The next day in Shir, one of the guys would do over the routine. And the guy would do the routine, and the whole Shir would be literally falling on the floor laughing. But the same lines I said, the exact words, same line, and the place would be falling on the floor laughing. And I said it, and I was like... And from that I learned a very important lesson. And that lesson is, but hear well what I'm saying, even if you can't tell a joke, you can have a sense of humor. And my friends, that's a big lesson to learn. And I'll explain to you what I mean. Not everyone has the gift of being funny. Not everybody can get up there and have people go, ha, ha, ha. But don't make the mistake to think that therefore you should not learn to develop and appreciate a sense of humor. And whether you can make other people laugh, or even if you can only make yourself laugh, it is key and essential to develop a sense of humor, to use that humor, to make it a part of your regular daily repertoire. Because even if you're not a ha-ha funny kind of guy, and even if you tell jokes about muffins in the ovens and they're really not funny, by the way, that joke, just to let you appreciate, I'm glad somebody laughed, because that joke was voted by CNN. 40,000 people voted that the funniest joke of 2002. I had a tough time with that because it really wasn't that funny. But I assumed, again, when I was going to deliver it, I assumed it was going to be dead silence over here. So the point would have been even more powerfully made. But the point is that even if you're not a hilarious guy, your name is not Jackie Mason, and you're not a very humorous person, knowing and understanding the importance of a sense of humor, knowing and understanding that it's something to utilize, it's a tool in your toolbox of many important things in your repertoire of successful people, is an important part of being a much more developed person, a person who can function better. By the way, the great people in the world usually have a very good sense of humor. One that comes to mind is Ronald Reagan. One of the greatest presidents, certainly of the 20th century, was Ronald Reagan. He always would start a speech, whether it was a State of the Union address, whether it was a local speech in a high school, he would invariably start the speech with a joke. And one time, someone actually asked him, Mr. President, why is it that you always started the speech with a joke? They assumed that it was to lighten up the audience. He said, it's for me. Because I come in, it's tense, I don't feel that comfortable. I tell a joke, I feel more relaxed. But you see, that's a man who spoke in public every day of his life. That was a man who was a professional actor. That was a man who was accustomed to crowds. Nothing fazed him. But he had a ha-ha laugh, and he was more comfortable, more relaxed, and he did a better job. Understanding the importance, understanding the value, understanding how it changes your relationships, understanding how it changes your moods is a very important part of being a successful person. And this power of laughter, I think, had a very interesting effect on Korach. The fact that he joined with 250 people specifically to mock and to be involved in derision of Moshe Rabbeinu is what caused them not to hear the answer. They weren't coming with a question, they were coming to mock. And what humor does is it changes the value of something. Moshe Rabbeinu was on that pedestal. Moshe Rabbeinu and Aaron were the great people. What mockery did, what laughter does, is changes the value system. They were no longer saints. They were no longer great people. They were now whatever. People to be made fun of, people to mock, because laughter changes the way you interpret a situation. Much like those people who were watching that first movie in Paris, it wasn't just the train coming at them, it was the interpretation. What that meant to them was danger. What laughter does is allows you to interpret the very same scene in a very different way. If you don't learn to laugh, what you do is you suffer an awful lot in life. Because there are many, many unfortunate things that befall a person. And most of us will suffer various situations of being down, angry at ourselves, maybe even depressed. If you are in a depressed mood, nothing matters. Nothing counts, nothing matters. And the ability to regulate your mood, The ability to change out of that mood is a great key to success. One of the very simplest and most efficient ways to change your mood and to reshape the way you feel is to laugh, to take a lighthearted approach, to find something humorous in it, and all of a sudden the entire scene changes, much like that colonel who changed that scene from tension to peace. Laughing and having such an attitude changes things in a very real way, and it is one of the most essential things for a person to use effectively. It's rather ironic that the same koach, the same power that can destroy, can be such a powerful, effective tool. It destroys because it changes the value of something to make it not valuable, but that same power can take tension, and can take anger, and can change it around until a person is happy, until a person feels very differently. And this is a very, very important part of being an effective person. Hashem grant us the wisdom, understanding, ability to put this into practice.